Have you ever felt like you were too different for the world around you? Like no matter what you did, people still looked at you and decided you did not belong. And deep inside you started to ask yourself if maybe something was wrong with you. Because that feeling, that quiet pain, is where this story begins. And today, I want to welcome you to English to Inspire, a place where you learn English, while you also learn how to become stronger. And if you feel that this message speaks to you, take 1 second to subscribe because this journey might change the way you see your own life. And now let me tell you about a girl who felt exactly like that. A girl who did not fit in, who was judged, who was laughed at, but who decided, step by step, to turn her pain into power. And that girl would one day become Lady Gaga, one of the most famous artists in the world. But at the beginning, she was just Stefani, a young girl growing up in New York City, surrounded by noise, pressure, and expectations. And even though she had a loving family and access to good education, she always felt like she was walking in the wrong direction compared to everyone else. Because while other kids wanted to be accepted, she wanted to express herself, and that difference created a wall between her and the world. As a child, Stefani was not afraid to show her creativity. She loved music. She played the piano, and she spent hours imagining a different life, a bigger life. But the world around her was not always ready for that kind of energy, and people can be very quick to judge what they do not understand. So instead of being celebrated, she was often seen as strange, as too much, as someone who needed to change. And here's the real question for you. What do you do when the world tells you to be less? Do you become smaller, quieter, invisible, or do you fight to become more, louder, and unstoppable? Because that decision, that exact moment, is where your future begins. And Stefani was slowly learning that being different was not a weakness, even if it felt painful at the time, even if it made her feel alone. Because every time someone laughed at her or ignored her, something inside her was growing, something strong, something that refused to disappear. But let's be honest. It is easy to say, be yourself when things are going well. It is much harder when you are alone, when you feel rejected, when you look around and see everyone else fitting in while you are standing outside the circle. And this is where most people quit. This is where most people decide to hide, to follow the crowd, to live a safe and small life. And maybe you are doing that right now. Maybe you have a dream. Maybe you have a voice. But you are afraid to show it. And the clock is ticking. Every single day. The clock is ticking. So I ask you again, what are you doing with your time? Are you building your dream or are you building your excuses? Because Stefani, even with all the doubt, even with all the pressure, was starting to make a choice. A quiet but powerful choice. To not give up on who she really was. And that small decision would slowly lead her into a world of even bigger challenges, where the pain would grow, but so would her hunger to prove that she was not wrong. She was just different, and that difference was about to be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. When you think about your past, do you see moments that made you stronger, or do you see moments that still hurt you? Moments that you try to forget, but somehow they stay with you. Because the truth is, pain does not disappear. It transforms you. And for Stefani, those early years of feeling different did not get easier as she grew older. In fact, they became more intense, more direct, and more personal. Because when you are a teenager, the world becomes louder. People become more judgmental, and the need to belong becomes stronger. And that is exactly where she found herself, walking into school every day, carrying not just books, but also the weight of other people's opinions. And those opinions were not kind. They were sharp, they were cruel, and they were constant. Because she was bullied. She was called names. She was laughed at, and sometimes she was made to feel like she did not deserve to be there. And that kind of environment can break a person if they are not careful. And here is something you need to understand. Bullying is not just about words. It is about repetition. It is about hearing the same negative message again and again until it starts to sound like the truth. And maybe you know this feeling. Maybe someone told you that you are not good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough. And after some time, you started to believe it. Because when a lie is repeated many times, it begins to feel real. And that is the real danger. Not what people say, but what you start to believe about yourself. And Stefani was in that battle, a silent war inside her mind, where one voice was telling her to stop, to change, to be like everyone else, while another voice, a quieter one, was telling her to keep going, to stay true, to not lose herself. And that internal fight is something every strong person must face at some point in life. But let me challenge you for a moment, because it is easy to blame the world. It is easy to say that people are the reason you are not moving forward. But at some point, you have to take responsibility for your own path, because the world will always have noise. The world will always have critics. And if you wait for silence, you will wait forever. And Stefani slowly started to understand this. Even in the middle of the pain, even when she felt alone, she did not completely give up on her dream. She kept playing music. She kept writing. She kept expressing herself. And that is important, because progress is not always loud. Sometimes progress is quiet. Sometimes it is just the decision to continue one more day. There were moments when she felt broken, moments when the pressure was too much. And this is something many people do not talk about. Because behind every strong person, there are days of doubt, days of fear, days when quitting feels easier than continuing. And maybe you are in one of those days right now. Maybe you feel tired. Maybe you feel like nothing is working. But listen carefully. Those moments are not the end. They are the test. They are asking you one simple question. How badly do you want this? Not tomorrow, not next year, but now. How badly do you want it now? Because Stefani, even with all the rejection around her, was building something inside that nobody could see yet. A kind of resilience, a kind of emotional strength that would later become her greatest weapon. And as she continued to face those challenges, something inside her started to change. Not the world around her, but the way she saw herself. And that shift would slowly push her to take her dream more seriously. To move from just surviving to actually chasing something bigger. At some point in life, you stop asking for permission and you start making decisions. And that moment is scary, because it means you can no longer blame anyone else if things go wrong. So let me ask you something very directly. Are you still waiting for someone to tell you that it is okay to follow your dream? Or are you ready to take responsibility and move forward even if nobody believes in you? Because this is exactly where Stefani found herself as she was growing older, standing between a safe path and a risky dream. And she knew that choosing music was not the easy option. It was not the comfortable option. It was the path full of uncertainty, rejection, and struggle. But something inside her was stronger than fear. Something kept telling her that she was not made to live a normal life. And that voice was getting louder every single day. She was accepted into a good college, a place where many people would feel secure, a place that could lead to a stable future. But deep inside, she felt that staying there would slowly kill her dream. Because while she was sitting in class, her mind was somewhere else. Her mind was on music, on performance, on creating something that the world had never seen before. And this is a moment many people face. The moment where you have to choose between security and purpose. And most people choose security because it feels safe, because it feels logical. But safe does not always mean right. And Stefani understood that. So she made a decision that many people around her did not understand. She left college to focus completely on music. And that decision was not easy. It was heavy. It was full of doubt. And it came with a simple reality. Now she had to prove that she was right. And this is where the real work began. Not the dream, not the idea, but the execution. Because having a dream is easy. Talking about a dream is easy. But working for it every single day when nobody is watching, when nobody is clapping, when nobody cares, that is where most people fail. And Stefani entered that phase with full intensity. She started performing in small clubs, in places where the audience was small, sometimes distracted, sometimes not even interested. But she showed up again and again, night after night, because she understood something very important. Every big stage begins with a small one. Every success begins with invisible work, and while other people were waiting for opportunities, she was creating them. Now let me push you a little, because this is where you need to be honest with yourself. Are you really working for your dream, or are you just thinking about it? Are you putting in the hours, the effort, the uncomfortable work, or are you waiting for the perfect moment? Because that moment does not exist. It never comes, and the clock is still ticking. Every single day, the clock is ticking, and Stefani was not waiting anymore. She was moving, even when it was hard, even when she was tired, even when doubt was still there. She kept going, and that consistency, that daily effort, was slowly building something powerful, something that the world could not see yet. But it was growing, and as she continued to push forward, life was preparing her for a moment that would test her in a completely different way. A moment where everything she built would seem to fall apart, and most people would quit right there. But her story was just getting started. What would you do if everything you worked for suddenly disappeared? If all your effort, all your sacrifices, all your long nights and hard days led to a moment where someone looked at you and said, "This is not good enough. We do not believe in you anymore." Would you walk away? Would you accept defeat? Or would you find a way to stand up again? Because this is not a motivational question. This is a real situation that Stefani faced when she was trying to build her career. And it hit her hard. Because after all the small shows, all the effort to get noticed, she finally had a chance. She signed with a record label, and for a moment, it felt like everything was starting to work. Like the dream was finally becoming real. But then, just as quickly as it came, it was taken away. She was dropped by the label. And just like that, the door closed. And let's be honest, that kind of rejection is different. It is not just people laughing at you in school. It is not just small criticism. It is a professional decision. It is someone with power saying, "We do not see your value." And that can destroy your confidence if you are not careful. Because when opportunity comes and then disappears, it leaves a deep mark. It makes you question everything. Your talent, your decisions, your future. And maybe you have experienced something similar. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you failed at something important. Maybe someone told you that you are not ready. And in that moment, it feels like the end. It feels like all your effort was for nothing. But here's where the story changes. Because failure is not just an event. Failure is a message. And the question is, how do you read that message? Stefani could have stopped right there. She could have said, "Maybe they are right. Maybe I am not good enough. Maybe I should choose a safer path." And many people do exactly that. They face one big failure and they decide to shrink their dreams. They decide to play small. But she did something different. Something that separates people who talk from people who achieve. She used that rejection as fuel, not as a reason to quit, but as a reason to improve, to grow, to come back stronger. And that mindset is not easy. It requires discipline. It requires belief. And it requires a deep understanding that one no does not define your entire life. Now, I want you to think about your own situation, because it is very easy to feel motivated when things are going well, but your real character appears when things fall apart, when plans fail, when doors close. And right now, you have a choice. You can use your past failures as excuses, or you can use them as energy. But you cannot do both. And the clock is still ticking. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now, what are you choosing now? Because Stefani made her decision. She chose to continue. She went back to work. She went back to writing, to performing, to pushing herself beyond her limits. And slowly, something started to change again. Not outside, but inside. Her identity was evolving. Her confidence was becoming stronger. And she was no longer trying to fit into the industry. She was preparing to change it completely. And that shift would lead her to create something bold, something different, something that the world could not ignore anymore. At some point, you realize that trying to fit in is exhausting. And no matter how much you change yourself, it is never enough for people who are already decided about who you should be. So, let me ask you something very honestly. How long are you going to keep adjusting your life just to make other people comfortable? How long are you going to hide your real personality, your real voice, your real ideas? Because that kind of life slowly destroys your confidence. It slowly takes away your energy. And Stefani was reaching that point, a moment where she understood that being accepted by everyone was not only impossible, it was also not necessary. And that realization was powerful, because instead of trying to become someone else, she made a bold decision. She would become more of who she already was. Not less, more, louder, stronger, and unapologetic. And this is where Lady Gaga was truly born. Not just as a name, but as an identity, as a complete expression of creativity, courage, and difference, because she understood something that most people ignore. If you try to be like everyone else, you become invisible. But if you fully accept who you are, even your strange parts, even your unusual ideas, you become unforgettable. And that is exactly what she did. She started to experiment with her style, with her music, with her performances. She pushed boundaries. She shocked people. She made them look even when they did not want to. And yes, many people criticized her. Many people did not understand her. But that was no longer her focus, because she was not trying to be understood by everyone. She was trying to be real with herself. Now let me challenge you again, because this is not just her story. This is your story, too. Are you hiding parts of yourself because you are afraid of judgment? Are you playing small because you think it is safer? Because if you are, you need to understand something very clearly. Safety can become a prison. Comfort can become a limit. And if you stay there too long, you will wake up one day full of regret, asking yourself, what could have happened if you had just been brave enough to try? And the clock is still ticking. Every single day, the clock is ticking. So the question is not if you have potential. The question is if you are willing to use it. For Stefani, this new identity gave her energy. It gave her direction. It gave her something powerful to stand on. Because now she was not asking for approval. She was creating her own space. She was building her own world. And that kind of mindset changes everything. Because when you stop asking for permission, you start taking control. And when you take control, you stop waiting and you start acting. And that is exactly what she did. She continued to perform, to write, to collaborate, to push her limits further and further. And even though success had not fully arrived yet, something important had already changed. She was no longer afraid to be seen. And here's the truth that many people avoid. You cannot build a big life with a small mindset. You cannot create something powerful if you are constantly holding yourself back. And Stefani was done with that. She was ready to show the world exactly who she was, without filters, without fear. And that level of authenticity, that raw and honest expression, was about to connect with something much bigger than she expected. Because when you finally step into your true identity, opportunities start to appear. And for her, one of those opportunities would change everything, opening a door that had been closed before. But this time, she was ready to walk through it and never look back. Have you ever wondered how close you are to your breakthrough? How many days, how many attempts, how many failures stand between you and the moment that can change your entire life? Because most people give up without realizing that they were just one step away. And that is the dangerous part. Not the difficulty, but the timing. Quitting too early, stopping too soon. And for Stefani, after all the rejection, all the long nights, all the effort that nobody saw, that moment was finally getting closer, even if she could not fully see it yet. Because success does not arrive with a warning. It arrives quietly, after you prove that you are ready. She kept working. She kept writing songs. She kept performing. And she kept building connections in the music world. And slowly, people started to notice something different about her. Not just her voice, but her presence, her energy, the way she owned the stage, the way she expressed something real, something raw, something that many artists were afraid to show. And that difference became her advantage, because while others were trying to follow trends, she was creating her own path. And that is what caught attention. That is what opened the next door, a real opportunity to record music that could reach a global audience. And then the moment arrived. The release of Just Dance, a song that at first was just another attempt, just another chance. But it quickly became something much bigger. It started to spread. People started to listen, to dance, to share. And before she could even process what was happening, the world was paying attention. Her name was everywhere. Her music was playing in clubs, on the radio, in different countries. And just like that, the girl who once felt invisible was now impossible to ignore. And this is how life works sometimes. Years of struggle can lead to one powerful moment that changes everything. But let me bring you back to reality, because it is easy to look at success and forget the journey behind it. It is easy to think that it happened fast, that it was luck, but you already know the truth. You have seen the work, the pain, the persistence. And this is why I need to ask you again. Are you willing to stay in the game long enough to reach your moment? Or are you going to stop when things get uncomfortable? Because your breakthrough is not just about talent. It is about endurance. It is about how long you can keep going when results are not immediate. For Stefani, this was the beginning of a new life. A life that many people dream about. Fame, recognition, success. But with it came new challenges, new pressures, and a level of exposure that can be overwhelming if you are not prepared. Because when the world starts watching you, everything changes. Your mistakes become public, your struggles become visible, and the expectations become higher and higher. And even though she had reached a dream that many people never took, she was about to learn that success has a price that is not always visible from the outside. And as the lights became brighter, the shadows in her life also started to grow. When people look at success, they usually see the lights, the money, the applause, and the recognition. But they do not see the pressure, the loneliness, and the emotional weight that comes with it. So let me ask you something real. Are you prepared for the responsibility that comes with your dream, or are you only focused on the reward? Because success is not just about gaining things. It is also about handling what comes with them. And for Lady Gaga, the world that once ignored her was now watching her every move, every word, every performance. And that level of attention can feel powerful at first, but over time, it can also become overwhelming. Her career was growing fast, faster than most people could imagine, with hit songs, global tours, interviews, and constant travel. And from the outside, it looked perfect. It looked like she had everything under control. But inside, things were more complicated, because when you are always in the spotlight, you lose privacy. You lose silence, and sometimes you even lose connection with yourself, because there is always something to do, somewhere to go, someone to please. And if you are not careful, you start living for others instead of living for yourself. And that is a dangerous place to be. And here is the truth that many people avoid. You can achieve your dream and still feel empty if you do not take care of your mind and your emotions. Because success does not automatically bring peace. It does not automatically solve your internal struggles. And for Lady Gaga, the pressure started to affect her deeply, physically and emotionally. She faced exhaustion. She faced pain. And there were moments when the weight of everything became too heavy. And this is something you need to understand clearly. Strength is not about never feeling weak. Strength is about continuing even when you feel that weight. Now let me challenge you again. Because maybe you are thinking that your problems will disappear when you reach your goals. Maybe you believe that once you succeed, everything will be easy. But that is not how life works. Every level has its own challenges. Every step forward brings new responsibilities. And if you are not building your mindset now, you will struggle later. So the question is not just what you want to achieve, but who you are becoming in the process. Are you building discipline? Are you building emotional control? Are you building resilience? Because those are the things that will support you when things get difficult. For Lady Gaga, this period was a test, not of talent, but of endurance, of identity, of mental strength, because she had to find a way to stay connected to herself while the world was pulling her in different directions. And that is not easy. It requires awareness. It requires honesty. And sometimes it requires facing truths that are uncomfortable, but necessary. And as she continued to move forward, she began to understand that success alone was not enough. She needed something deeper, something more meaningful. And that realization would push her to open up about her struggles, to speak about things that many people are afraid to say. And in doing so, she would not only help herself, but also millions of people around the world who were silently fighting their own battles. Have you ever smiled in front of people while feeling broken inside? Have you ever pretended that everything was fine because you thought no one would understand your pain? Because this is more common than you think. And for a long time, Lady Gaga lived in that space. A space where the world saw strength, confidence, and success. But inside, there were wounds that had not healed, memories that still hurt, and emotions that were difficult to face. And at some point, she realized that staying silent was not helping her. In fact, it was making things heavier, because when you hide your pain, it does not disappear. It grows. She began to open up about her experiences, about trauma, about anxiety, about depression. And that was not an easy decision, because when you speak honestly, you expose yourself, you show your vulnerability. And many people are afraid of that. They are afraid of being judged, misunderstood, or seen as weak. But what she understood is something very powerful. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is courage. It is the decision to be real, even when it is uncomfortable. And that decision changed not only her life, but also the lives of millions of people who were listening to her story and finally felt seen. And here is something important for you. Because this is not just about her. This is about you too. How long are you going to carry everything alone? How long are you going to pretend that you are okay when you are not? Because asking for help does not make you weak. It makes you human. And ignoring your emotions does not make you strong. It makes the problem bigger over time. So you need to be honest with yourself. You need to face what you feel. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Because your mental and emotional health are not optional. They are essential. Lady Gaga did more than just talk. She took action. She used her platform to support mental health awareness, to create safe spaces, and to remind people that they are not alone. And that is a powerful shift. Because instead of hiding her struggles, she transformed them into a mission. She turned her pain into purpose. And that is something you can learn from. Because your struggles, your difficult moments, your failures, they are not just problems. They are also tools. They can teach you, they can shape you, and they can give you a deeper understanding of yourself and others. But let me be clear. This is not about staying in pain. This is about growing through it. This is about using your experiences as fuel to build a stronger version of yourself. And that requires effort. That requires awareness. And that requires the willingness to change. Because if you keep doing the same things, you will keep getting the same results. And the clock is still ticking. Every single day, the clock is ticking. So the question remains, what are you going to do with your time? Because Lady Gaga was not done evolving. She was not done exploring her potential. And as she continued to grow, she started to move beyond music, stepping into new challenges, new roles, and new opportunities that would once again test her courage and expand her identity even further. What happens when you reach the top of one mountain? Do you stop there and stay comfortable? Or do you look for a new mountain to climb? Because growth does not stop unless you decide to stop. And this is something Lady Gaga understood very well. She could have stayed only in music. She could have repeated the same formula, the same style, the same path that already worked. And many people do exactly that. They find something that brings success, and they hold on to it. Afraid to change, afraid to fail again. But she chose a different direction. She chose growth, even if that meant risk, even if that meant starting again in a new area. She began to explore acting, stepping into a world where she was not already established, where she had to prove herself again. And that takes humility. That takes courage. Because when you are successful in one field, it is easy to protect your image, to avoid situations where you might fail. But she accepted that challenge. She put herself in a position where she could be judged again, where people could say that she was not good enough. And that is not comfortable, but it is necessary if you want to expand your potential. And her effort paid off, with powerful performances that surprised many people, showing a different side of her talent, a deeper, more emotional expression that connected with audiences in a new way. And this is important, because it proves that you are not limited to one identity. You are not just one thing. You can evolve. You can learn. You can grow in multiple directions if you are willing to put in the work. And that idea can change your life if you truly accept it. Now, let me ask you something directly. Are you growing or are you repeating? Are you challenging yourself or are you staying in your comfort zone? Because staying comfortable may feel good today, but it creates regret tomorrow. And the clock is still ticking. Every single day, the clock is ticking. So you need to make a decision. Not later. Not when you feel ready. But now. Are you going to push yourself or are you going to stay where you are? Because time does not wait for anyone. Lady Gaga also expanded into business and philanthropy, using her influence to create impact beyond entertainment, showing that success is not only about personal achievement, but also about contribution, about what you give back to the world. And this is a higher level of thinking, because when you move from taking to giving, your purpose becomes stronger, your motivation becomes deeper, and your actions start to affect not just your life, but the lives of others. And this is where her journey becomes even more meaningful, because she is no longer just building a career. She is building a legacy, something that will last beyond her own success, something that inspires others to believe in themselves, to take action, to be brave enough to change. And as her story continues, everything she learned, every challenge she faced, every moment of pain and growth leads to one final message, one powerful truth that you need to hear. Because at the end of the day, all of this is not just about her. It is about you, your life, your choices, and what you decide to do starting today. So now let me ask you one last question, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself. Not with me, not with anyone else, but with yourself. Are you truly living your life? Or are you just watching it pass by while you wait for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right feeling? Because if there is one thing the story shows you, it is that there is no perfect moment. There is only the moment you decide to act, and everything changes after that decision. Slowly, painfully, but powerfully. And Lady Gaga's journey is not just about fame, music, or success. It is about choice. It is about deciding, again and again, to move forward, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when nobody understands. She was different. She was judged. She was rejected. She was told no. She faced failure, pressure, and pain. But none of those things stopped her. And do you know why? Because she did not let those moments define her identity. She used them as fuel. She used them as lessons. She used them as reasons to grow. And that is exactly what you need to do. Because your past is not your prison unless you decide to stay there. Your struggles are not your limits unless you accept them as limits. And your fears are not your reality unless you let them control your actions. Now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. What are you going to do with your time? What are you going to do with your energy? What are you going to do with your potential? Because you have it, even if you doubt it. Even if you cannot see it clearly yet, it is there, waiting for you to take responsibility, waiting for you to stop making excuses and start making decisions. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, people may not understand you. Yes, you might fail, but that is part of the process. That is the price of growth. And avoiding that price only leads to regret. And let me tell you something very direct. Nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is going to build your dream for you. Nobody is going to live your life for you. That responsibility is yours, and that is not a negative thing. That is power. Because it means you are in control. It means you can change your direction at any moment. It means you can start again, no matter where you are right now, no matter how many mistakes you made, no matter how far you feel from your goal. Lady Gaga decided to be herself. When it was difficult, she decided to continue. When it was painful, she decided to grow. When it was uncomfortable. And those decisions, repeated day after day, created the life she lives today. And the same principle applies to you. Small decisions, repeated consistently, create massive change over time. But only if you commit, only if you stay consistent, only if you refuse to quit when things get hard. So this is your moment. Not a perfect moment, but a real one. A moment where you can choose to think differently, act differently, and live differently. Because the world does not need another copy. It needs someone real, someone brave, someone willing to step forward and take responsibility for their own life. And that someone can be you if you decide, right now, to stop waiting and start moving. Because the clock is ticking, the opportunity is in front of you, and your future is being created by what you do next. So, move, act, build, grow, and become the person you know you can be. Because the world is waiting for you, and it has been waiting for too long. So do not make it wait any longer. Stay strong.